Hi, I'm Brian Shifman, the President and CEO of the Vaughan Chamber of Commerce. I wanted to welcome you here again from your living rooms, maybe your dining room, your kitchens, but at home. We're doing another business resource series with the Vaughan Chamber of Commerce. So I'm our President and CEO, and I've appreciated the candid chats we've had on our business resource series and our town halls with a whole series of people from accountants to employment lawyers. We've had a number of elected officials. Today, Minister Michael Tibollo is enough to come back and return, and we appreciate that. You were great to be with us a couple weeks ago. But today's focus is on addressing mental health in the midst of a pandemic. And so I'm going to first just remind everybody that from home, you should be going to the Vaughan Chamber website often. You go on the business resource page. It's the COVID-19 business resources. Takes you to a page that gives you all the newest government supports for business all in one place. So you're not spending all your time looking through the internet trying to find those. Also, I wanted to thank our live webcasting partner, Render Media, and the VBAC, the Vaughan Business Enterprise Center from Economic Development City of Vaughan, for supporting us with these. As I said, today we're going to focus on mental health, anxiety, stress. We're all under a certain level of stress, working from home. There's, for some, job insecurity, job loss. What happens when I go back to work? So I want to get it kicked off. First, formally welcome Minister Michael Tibollo. He's our MPP from Vaughan-Woodbridge, Associate Minister of Mental Health and Addiction. So obviously perfect to have you with us.
Great to be here.
And we also very pleased to have Mary Marano. She's owner of Life and Family Counselling, psychotherapist, and also a Vaughan Chamber member. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Sure, we'll have a great chat. For the intro, we're going to kick it over to Minister Tibollo, talk us about mental health from a government perspective, and then we're going to go to Mary, and she's going to talk on a more personal basis, what people should be doing, what they're experiencing, and then I've got a series of questions for you, and we do have some live questions coming in from our audience at home.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brian, and good morning, everyone. It's great to be here and speak about a topic that's very important today, especially given the light of the pandemic and what we're experiencing in the province of Ontario, across Canada, actually around the world. The government of Ontario has taken an approach to this that is similar in a lot of ways to what other countries are doing in other provinces. We are investing in mental health. We're investing in the only type of mental health that we can really invest in today, and that is virtual supports. It's difficult when we talk about physical distancing and trying to maintain that physical distancing to allow face-to-face meetings or group meetings to take place. But we understand the importance of there being supports, and especially given the kind of numbers that we're starting to see in terms of people in need. We've talked about a few things. I have a couple of slides that maybe we can put up as well. The first slide just basically talks about why we are being successful in the province of Ontario right now. It's thanks to the people of the province of Ontario. They're staying at home, they're maintaining physical distancing, they're washing their hands, they're making sure that they're only going out when they have to go out. And that's done a great deal to ensure that our numbers have started to flatline. And we're seeing that now, which is a great lead into things that will be announced today and in the coming days with respect to the opening of our economy, because I think we're all getting a little cabin fever and wanting to get out. But in the process of having been in the situation that we have been staying at home, we've seen, and there was a recent poll that was conducted by Angus Reid, which is the second slide, and the second slide talks about the different types of things that we're seeing. 50% of the people in Canada are feeling anxiety as a result of what's been happening with respect to COVID and having to stay at home. We see the statistics, and there's a couple that are very significant for me. The demographic that's affected the most are women between the ages of 18 and 54. I'm not surprised by it, because they ultimately bear a lot of the difficulty with having the kids at home, having to maintain a household, and do things, and a lot of them are working as well. So the combination of all the stress and all the extra burden, it makes sense that they would have a higher than average sense of anxiety, and again, it's something that we have to make sure we do something about when we provide supports for, as well as what we are doing as a province from the standpoint of where investments have gone. The next slide basically talks about the different helplines that are available. Now, we always start off by saying that if you have been seeing someone and that person has been providing you support, reach out to them. Chances are, and I'm interested to hear how it's being dealt with in terms of practice, but I'm assuming that a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists are working remotely, which means that they're doing things via the internet. Part of our reform in health and mental health as well is to want to try to get as many services out to individuals as possible virtually. And we're seeing a huge transformation in health and in mental health, in that we have the helplines that have been set up. Our roadmap to mental wellness is also going to have a component that relates to providing supports to individuals through structured psychotherapy. We call it Mindability in the province. For the time being, we've had to jumpstart it as a virtual cognitive behavioral therapy, which means that the services are being provided through the internet. So the message that I have to individuals watching us and listening to us, we know that there's stress and there is anxiety in children, in adults. We're also seeing it in our seniors. That was a problem before, and I think it's really become even a bigger problem given the fact that so many have succumbed to a death and to COVID-19. So we have to look at ways of integrating them into our lives using social media, using Facebook, chat lines, and whatever else we can do to get them engaged and keep them in our minds, and also let them know that we're keeping them in our minds as well. So I'm going to stop there, and I want to give as much time as possible to questions. So I'll stop with that and say that there is help out there. The phone numbers are all up on the screen, the Connects line, the Kids Help phone line, the Bounce Back line. There are supports for first responders and frontline workers, because we know that they're getting extremely stressed out as well with the long hours they're doing. And I want to thank them for what they're doing, and everybody who's working in the economy to keep it functioning to the level it is functioning. Stay home when you have to, stay safe. And if you're working, maintain those social distances. The work that the people of the province have done so far has been extraordinary, and we will get out of this, and we will get out of it sooner if we continue doing what we've been doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I appreciate what you said there about, I know you've had some meetings today, so we're looking forward to further announcements on ways we can start to continue physical distancing and prioritize safety, but also start to open up our economy in a safe, responsible way. So we'll look for that. I don't want to get you in trouble by getting you to leak any information, but thanks.
Well, I can say it first here for all of you. Look forward to good news in the coming days. There is hope. We are seeing the trends moving in the right direction. So stay tuned. And our Premier is doing a fantastic job keeping everybody up to date. And I think you'll be happy with the rollouts that are going to start happening soon.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So now we're going to turn it over to Mary Marano. I was saying you're a psychotherapist, and give you the floor for a presentation.
Yes, so thank you, Minister Tibollo. I appreciate all your advocacy, and Brian for having me. Now, one of the things that I teach people is how to move through uncomfortable feelings. But before we can do that, we actually have to be able to understand what those uncomfortable feelings are. And when Mr. Tibollo says, there's 50% of Canadians that are worried, that's, so true. Like 1 in every 10 Canadian has reported that their mental health has worsened during this time, and 16% of them are depressed due to emotional and financial stress. So the numbers are pretty big when we look at them. And a lot of times what we don't recognize is that when things like this happen, we go through life adjustments. And the adjustments, we call them, or life adjustments, they're like loss, right? They actually can become disordered if we're not mindful of them. And right now, this is not just a health crisis, it's a financial and a mental health crisis. And families have experienced unimaginable losses. So we're not only talking about loss from physical death and dying, we're talking about things that we call living losses and anticipated losses. And I don't want to spend too much time, but I do want to sort of break some of that down so people understand what those feelings actually look like when they do show up. So a living loss is, and it can feel as familiar and as intense as death and dying. Adjustment disorder can actually happen for many people. Think of what happens: our loss of freedom, our loss of, or the inability to move around safely in the world, the loss of meaningful connections or our livelihoods, watching our businesses change and maybe even close. And then we have, what we call anticipated losses that come with anxiety and uncertainty. And those things are, the anticipation of going back into the workplace, losing, income or being able to make ends meet. We have, what happens when we have to shift our businesses? Will we have a business? Preparing children to go back to school if that's going to happen. What happens to parents who are now preparing to go back to work and they still have children at home? How are they going to balance, home and family life when all of this new reality, starts to happen? One of the things that I really want to stress is when overwhelmed kicks in, what people don't recognize is that overwhelmed, our brain and our body can actually experience overwhelmed like trauma. And trauma doesn't only have to be catastrophic. It can be subtle and, kick in over time. And we're seeing that during, these past weeks that have happened. We started off okay, and then look at what happens when it starts to continue and it's there for longer. And what we have to prepare for is this surge of post-traumatic stress symptoms. We're going to have to prepare for, health anxieties and fears and other mental health related issues. We have to start to prepare for, how we're going to re-engage and reintegrate when we go back into large group settings, and how are we going to establish this new normal. So I know that people have, a lot of questions or concerns that might be coming up, but, I'll just, give it to you, Brian, to sort of maybe ask some questions, or, if people need some recommendations or tips, we can go through some of that.
Sure. Thanks, Mary. Well, the one question listening to you that I come up with immediately is, why are some days or weeks harder for people right now during COVID-19 than others? So I actually heard a lot of people say that the most recent week was by far their hardest. Is that just because it's an accumulation of stress and it just sort of hits you at that time, or something else happening?
Well, think about what happens when we are listening to now the news that's up and coming, right? So we kind of were in a groove of staying home, and we've established our work life, our family life. Maybe we've got two, parents working, so we're spinning children off, so we've kind of got this well-oiled machine happening. And now we're saying, okay, now we're going to switch it. Right? There's a change that's going to happen. So, some of us can be better with change than others, but now we're talking about transitioning and going back to work. And then we have another set of, issues that we have to confront or we have to look at.
Well, I'm gonna come back to you on that. I want to ask Minister Tibollo just a high level question. What are your overall primary concerns in terms of how social and physical distancing measures are impacting mental health during COVID-19?
Well, I think, and it's interesting to hear that, because you're right. One of the first things we said when we started telling people to stay at home and not go out was that you need to establish a routine, because we're creatures of habit. We're used to getting up at a certain time and doing certain things in a certain way. And then, you've got your social circles, work, lunches, meetings, and a whole strategy that goes around what you do from when you get up to when you go to bed. To abruptly change that and stay at home, create a new pattern that's to be followed. Now all of a sudden, it's exactly right. We're saying, well, we're going to start loosening things up, and you'll be able to get out. The issues that I've seen again has been the isolation as a result of not being able to interact with people, especially older people that don't have access to Facebook and the internet, or that aren't as competent with the use of it. They're the ones that are at the greater risk. From the standpoint of our young people, they're used to playing and seeing their friends and touching and that contact. And a lot of parents, to try to even protect their kids if they have to go out, are maintaining distance. So they're losing that contact and that touch. They're not having the time to spend with their friends, and it's causing them to be concerned, especially when they hear the number of people that are dying as a result of the COVID-19. So, again, those are the types of things that we've always said: speak to your children, spend time communicating, interacting, utilizing social media. These are the things that are going to make a difference. As we transition now, and I have to agree with Mary on this, as we transition, it starts creating again that anxiety of a change. This is like, and I still have nightmares of writing exams or missing an exam in university, and I've been out of school I'm in school, but it's been a long time, but I still have those emotions and that anxiety. Now you can imagine someone that's going to have to transition back, the kids who've been with the parents all this time, being separated from them again, and having to establish those routines. Now we are resilient as human beings. We're resilient, and we're able to bounce back. And when you talk about things like post-traumatic stress disorder that comes out as a result of a crisis, about 90% of people are able to cope with it. So the best suggestion that I could have is find ways to start easing into the old routines that you had. Start talking about them, especially with the young kids. I think the seniors, we're going to have to be extremely cautious with how we start engaging again with them, because of the circumstances that they live in, and how easy it is for the COVID to spread between people. So, but as we start to get back into routines, we'll have to be careful. It won't be as the way it was before, that the kisses on the cheeks, the handshakes. I think we'll see people with masks. We'll see people maintaining that physical distancing. And we're going to find new ways to socialize. The tables in restaurants might have to get a little longer, so that two people sitting down, or perhaps there are going to have to be fewer people in the restaurants, at least till we get to the point that we're comfortable and we can actually track if COVID is in the community, where it is, and what we need to do to isolate it again, so that we don't end up it being spread throughout the entire community.
Oh, that's a good point. Now, I will follow up after. I want to talk about getting back to work. I want to ask Mary shortly about kids in this specific environment, but I want to go a little higher level to begin with. Mary, with you, is just what should people be doing to protect their mental health during this disruption?
There's a lot of things that we can do. Think of if people have their EAP programs, right? Their employee assistant programs. We have access to, you pay for it, use it. There's so many therapists that are working, they're offering free services. I know I'm working through phone and video sessions, so you can access, safely that way. There are so many, there's a talk and text line that people can access. There's the kids helpline if kids are struggling during this time, because not all families are good families. So we have those stresses that are happening. So we do have access to those things. Get outside and walk. Walking is one of the easiest, forms of exercise that can help oxygen move back to the brain if you're feeling a bit anxious. If you get off the sofa, go outside to your back deck, do some stretches, do some deep breaths. Those are easy and free things that people can do to kind of help them sort of, get that feeling out and, re-energize themselves.
Now, I was going to follow up with, and I just on that point about walking. So I was going to ask you for a few practical tips people can be doing right now to reduce their stress. And I want you to keep in mind people who might live in a condo or an apartment building who are going to be like, there's no backyard to go to. And maybe there are instances, especially if you're a senior, where you're very reluctant to even leave your apartment. I know people who won't leave their house. So, are there practical tips people can be doing if they don't feel comfortable to walk outside?
Yeah. So again, when it comes to movement can be in many different forms. Put on some music, right? And if, you're someone who's older and isn't too savvy with sort of navigating themselves on the computer, you could put some music on and you can just sort of, kind of tap into sort of those, parts of your brain to help sort of reduce, stress. You can dance around your apartment, just moving your body. Just the fact that you get up and do some stretches, that's absolutely going to help. The energy in your body needs somewhere to go, and when you do it that way, it actually helps. Get on the phone and call somebody, right? So if you're not comfortable using video, call somebody and stay connected. I think that's been sort of the biggest help during this time, is we do still have access to those connections virtually.
And Mary, if I can add to that as well, there are so many videos now that you can watch to learn how to dance, there's exercise videos that are free online that are amazing. And the other thing that I find very therapeutic, I used to have a stress ball at my desk, but it actually broke on me. I guess I squeezed it too hard. But baking bread, I read an article just recently about the therapeutic effect on individuals when baking bread, because again, kneading the dough and it takes a lot of that stress and that energy, and then you end up with a loaf of bread, which in my case isn't necessarily the best thing, because then I'll eat it. But I think it's a great way as well, to do some cooking, but basically be active, to sit in front of the television and watch, CP24 or CNN or whatever news station for 8 hours or 10 hours a day. All that is going to do is add anxiety and stress. I think you need to bring some normalcy back into your life. Even, with hobbies. There's a lot of people that have hobbies that they've just had to put on the back burner. Get back into the hobbies. Do some reading, do some planting, because that's another thing that I find very therapeutic, is just, having, planting some seeds and looking after them, and, soon getting the garden ready outside and getting it organized and watching it grow. It's again, very therapeutic, a distraction from, some of what we're having to deal with today. And the other thing too is I think it's really important that if you can volunteer your time, that doesn't mean going out and having to volunteer time. You can volunteer your time through the internet as well. And that, you can reach out through different organizations. I spent some time yesterday with Hospice Vaughan. I think they're on the line with us, and I want to give a shout out to them. They've got things that they're doing with youth, in the area of grief and bereavement, in terms of setting up communications with individuals and young people. It's important that we stay engaged. It's important that we don't forget we're social animals and we need each other. We can't just, stay isolated in a cocoon and hope. It's great for a couple of days. I certainly enjoyed the first couple of days of recharging, rebooting, as I call it. But after a while, you've got to start doing things and staying active.
For sure.
Well, and you make a good point about Hospice Vaughan. It's sort of like when we've done a couple segments with accountants, and one of the things I've said is probably the first person you should be on the phone with regularly is your accountant. But in the same way, like, you need to reach out to the person you're most comfortable with. And when it comes to support for psychotherapy, or just someone to speak to, or just general counseling, whether it's Hospice Vaughan, and I know they do a lot of that, some of it's free, or whether it's with Mary or anyone else, I think the goal here is the message that I know, Minister, you and I have been saying a lot, is we are all in this together. And I don't want anyone to feel like they're in this by themselves and alone.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the main reasons we're having this chat, is to try and come up with some practical ways to deal with some of the stress, and ultimately not one solution is not going to fit for everybody.
Yeah.
To that point, I mean, jokingly, I might ask the minister, what dance lessons are you learning right now?
I don't dance, Brian, but I do. I planted, I can't tell you how many thousands of seeds I planted, all extremely hot chili peppers, different types of chili peppers from around the world. But they're all grown to about 2 inches now, so they're just about ready. Another month they'll be out in the soil. I have spent a lot of time online learning new techniques when it comes to things like the different types of things, vegetables, things that we can grow. I'm doing things that I always wanted to do, but my life is so busy. Having practiced law and then becoming a minister, the amount of time that I spend reading and working every day, and it's actually increased now, but I managed to find that 1 hour where I can do something for myself. I don't bake because I shouldn't be baking, because I eat the end product, but planting things, and I spend a lot of time also speaking to different groups, again, trying to understand what is happening in the community, because again, the biggest concern we have is a lot of people still have this stigma or this belief that you can't have a mental health issue. We all have mental health issues.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I try to do is I try to say, look, you need to have those supports in place. None of us would limp around with a broken leg and expect it to heal at some point in the future, right? We would go to the hospital. In the case of mental health, there's people like Mary that are doing incredible work. There's groups like Hospice Vaughan that are doing great support work. What we need to do is tap into them and know that it's okay to talk. Because again, nothing feels better, and I'm sure that people listening to us will understand and agree to this. A lot of times having a good conversation with someone, and that's what a therapist does. A therapist will elicit that conversation and help you relieve some of the pressure and stress that's built up as a result of the fact that you don't feel comfortable talking about it. So talking to a therapist, if one's available, utilizing the helplines, gives us the individual to say it's okay to talk, and a lot of work's been done, but still more needs to be done. We're this attitude that we were self-contained and we don't need to look after our mental health. I've had too many experiences now in this ministry and in this role, and when I was Minister of Community Safety and Corrections, where I saw people that were probably in the best physical condition of their lives commit suicide, and not to want to get into statistics and heavy, because we're having a good conversation, but the suicide rates are up. The calls with respect to suicide are up. The calls with respect to anxiety and depression on the different helplines are all up. And we're in a very precarious situation where our therapists can't really help individuals with face-to-face meetings. So we have to keep on saying, and this is one of the reasons why the government invested $12 billion into the helplines, is to make sure that there's enough capacity to help individuals. And you're not alone. We're isolated, but we're not alone. We still live in society, and we still are here to help each other. And that's what the government's trying to do as well with our strategy for mental health and addictions at this point.
Well, I think of the analogy of with hockey, that I think a lot of Canadians are like hockey players. We just pick ourselves up and push through it. But I think that in this situation, with the amount of stress we're all dealing with, sometimes it's not, you got to push through it, but it's okay to acknowledge that moment or those moments of stress and reach out to somebody. I was hoping the minister help clarify something for us. And granted, you're not a doctor, but I think you'll have a good answer on this. Is just, what is your advice for someone right now who just feels nervous to go out for a walk, in spite of the fact they could physical distance and they could wear a mask?
Yeah, well, if you're if you own a property and you have some land around it, it's a great opportunity to go out and inspect the house, look at the condition of your backyard. It's the spring, so things may have broken, so just take an inventory of things like that. And if you're in an apartment, you can still go out. There's grounds around the property. Maintain your distance. If you're gonna, I wear gloves when I go out, and that may be overkill, but I figure if I'm gonna take the gloves off, then I'll use a hand sanitizer, or I'll wash my hands when I come inside, and I'm very careful. not to touch my mouth, my nose, or my eyes. For me, the most important thing right now is to change up, and again, we've established new routines, but to start changing up those routines. So if you're going to go out, take a look at the environment around you. A lot of times, the day goes by and we pass things and we don't even remember driving by something, or, this is the time to do some exploring. Go for a walk, maintain that social distancing. If you live in the same house with an individual that you want to go for a walk, you don't have to be 6 feet apart. You can walk together and start looking at things that perhaps you wouldn't have noticed before. I can't believe how many squirrels live in my backyard. Like I am shocked. We moved in, there were no squirrels on this property, and I planted a lot of trees, and over the last 15 years the trees have matured. I've got like more squirrels, and my distraction is sometimes to gaze at them and watch them jump from tree to tree to tree. But I got to have like 15, 20 squirrels living in my backyard, which is like phenomenal compared to. So notice those types of things. Look at the little plants starting to come out. I don't know if you've noticed the lawn, how green it's gotten. And if you haven't, Brian, you better get ready to start cutting it because it's going to come.
Yeah, that's true.
But these are the things you have to start looking at. And then, I'm one of these people that believes in all your senses have to be, invoked. And so, I love the smell of fresh cut grass, and to be able to start smelling those and those senses, they start bringing me into a phase of growth again, of renewal. And, I look at trying to change up my routine a little bit, to try to do something a little bit different every day, try to set a task that I want to complete by the end of the day. And I'm actually, killing a lot of things off the list that I, for years have been stacking because there's just no time. Even good books. I mean, I've got a stack of books that I like to try to read through. And these are the types of things that we're going to miss one day. And we're going to look back and we're going to say, we have this opportunity. I look at it from a government standpoint, and the COVID-19, as much as we've seen the incredible amount of death and hurt that it's caused, not only to ourselves, but to the economy as well. I look at all this and I think to myself, okay, I always believe in the cup being half full, Mary. So what do we have in this situation that we can say is something positive? Well, one of the things that's positive from a government standpoint, we have completely modernized and are transforming the healthcare system, mental health and addiction systems, our judicial system. I mean, we've advanced things that we thought was going to take us 10 years to change, and we've done it because we were forced to make these changes. So from a government standpoint, I think it's been incredibly useful to utilize this time to better the way we govern the people of Ontario. And, in businesses, I heard this morning people starting to talk about, one of the calls I was on was with the governor of the Bank of Canada, and his comments were that the economy going forward is going to be different from the standpoint of, how many offices do you need to have and how much work can be done from individuals at home in their home offices. So we're going to see a lot of transformations taking place that hopefully will make us more effective in business and will make us better from the standpoint of being able to deliver services to the people in the province.
Well, I hopefully. Mary, I wanted to turn to you. I have found, and I think I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of our members, that work-life balance in normal times was next to impossible. So what work-life balance looks like now is at another level altogether. What recommendations do you have for people who are feeling like that right now?
Well, I just want to make a point just before we go into that, just that we're all in this together, but clearly we're not all going through it the same way. So I just want to be mindful of that, because some people are going through it in stride, and some other people are going through it, some devastations are happening around us. So just to comment on that. When we talk about what that work-life balance is going to look like, look at, it just amazed me that the moment, things shut down, huge corporations were able to, within that first week, deconstruct their business and bring it, into everybody's home. And I think a lot of people underestimate going back to work, they're going to actually enjoy some of that as well, because you're not going to have to struggle with, your children sort of walking in on your meetings, or, having to negotiate the time with your partner. So definitely there's going to be some pros to that. But when it comes to that balance, this is what my hope will be, is that we can actually start to look at the work-family blend and maybe have some more respect for what's going to happen moving forward. Can we have more work from home? Can we support families, in better ways? So these are all really great questions. And I think as things unfold, we're going to see, the opportunity to have maybe more days at home versus in the office. Maybe it's going to cut down on commute times, which gives us more family time, so we can actually embrace, what happens after, COVID. So we can actually, appreciate life more, our families more, and maybe employers can look at how, that can also benefit them. A happier employee is going to definitely, bring more production and, kind of that, better feeling when they come into work.
That makes sense. Well, before we started, Minister Tibollo's met my daughter a few times, and Mary, you just met her. So
Yes.
She's just over 4. What's the advice? So many of our members of the chamber have little children.
Mm-hmm.
How do you explain what's happening to a 4-year-old?
Well, I think you don't necessarily need to go into a lot of details with a 4-year-old. Remember, that 4-year-old is going to respond to the adults in their life. So if there's a lot of...
Don't forget, she's 4 going on 20. So she's asking all the questions why she can't see her friends and all this stuff, right?
Of course. Well, and think of what happens, right? So energetically, if we're stressed out and we're full of anxiety, a child's emotional mind is what's developed. They're not saying, oh, this is a COVID time and mom and dad are really stressed out about this. All they pick up on are mom and dad's feelings, their energy, their reactions to things. So if you're not feeling in great shape and you're stressed out, their world is going to feel unsafe. They're not going to talk to you about it. You're going to see it through their behaviors. And what you're going to do is you're going to answer the questions they're asking. So if they're asking why they can't see their friends, you're just going to answer, that, we're on a break now. It's almost like an extended March break, or we're in sort of that summertime. It's the same sort of feeling for them. And then eventually what happens, if you're confident in your responses, that's going to ease what's happening for that child.
No, I think that's great advice. Ultimately, she's well adjusted, but I know like some kids, and we've seen her ask this as well. Like if one of us is going out of the house, she might get a little nervous, like, why are you leaving? So we try and like lower the stress that way. But I'm sure a lot of our members are experiencing things like that. So I appreciate that answer. What about for a few of our members who've had loved ones pass away recently?
Yeah.
How is a family member supposed to feel that can't effectively celebrate the life of a loved one who passed away because the funeral needs to be so small and confined? And that's assuming they didn't even die of COVID. Or how should I feel, or you, or the minister, in terms of, we know someone who had a loved one pass away and we would have liked to be at the visitation or the funeral, and we can't be there in the way we're used to being there.
Yeah. So, I've had my own experiences with, I have a mom who's in long-term care. So that's sort of been a difficult and challenging time. And, we can still do many things to support our loved ones. It may not be in the same way, but, people can set up memorial pages. People can send virtual candles. I know we sent a delivery to our friends who lost one of their parents. We can do curbside deliveries. They're not going to be wanting to cook because they're grieving. So can you prepare some foods and, send it over so they don't have to worry about, those kind of day-to-day things, and people really appreciate those things. And we also have, kind of like what the old-fashioned way, we could, send a card, we can send a note, and just know that after, we're coming out of this, that there's going to be an opportunity to have celebrations of life, where we can gather together, where we can, celebrate the person who's passed, and it won't be the same, no. But we want to sort of, try to normalize our stresses the best that we can, right? It is a negative time. You can't escape those negative feelings. So how do we support each other as we go through it? We want to be kind, we want to be gentle, and check in on them, right? You can always check in on people. And like Minister Tibollo said, we're creatures that need to be social. We crave that connection. So especially during times of loss, it's important to make sure that, if people were struggling before with their mental health, if there has been a big loss, that we want to make sure that they're staying connected to their loved ones.
No, that's fair enough. Minister Tibollo, I have a more structured question in terms of, I'm going to ask it to you. This was submitted to us by one of our members in advance. How concerned are you about the long-term effects of unemployment, job insecurity, or needing to work to homeschool children, and that those aspects will have on mental health? How concerned are you about that, and how can the government address those concerns?
Yeah. So when it comes to the kids are very resilient. The time that's being spent now with virtual learning, and I don't think that they're going to have an issue with respect to bouncing back. Again, we're looking at the school year, the kids going back to school if possible around the middle of May. Some of the jurisdictions are basically closing the schools till September. It remains, or we'll see what the chief medical officer says with respect to Ontario. But, kids are very resilient. I'm not too concerned there. When we look at what we had happen in the past, so for instance, with SARS, what we had happen with the recession, we had situations there where a lot of people were impacted. And mental health issues were very prevalent then, and we learned a lot from then, which is why it worked out well that we developed the Roadmap to Mental Wellness as the strategy for mental health and addictions in the province of Ontario. Unfortunately, it was announced at the same time that the pandemic was announced, and so we've not really had the benefit of being able to show what we're rolling out. So for instance, Mindability for me, having structured psychotherapy available to everyone in the province of Ontario free of charge is something that will go a long way to helping individuals cope with anxiety and depression, because it's based on cognitive behavioral therapy delivered either through the internet or with psychotherapists and nurse practitioners and psychiatrists. So we're prepared for the onset of people needing those types of services. Do I expect it to flatline at the same time that the COVID, the positive testing with COVID? No, I think it's going to increase. And as a matter of fact, we are predicting that it's going to increase. We have a command table that's specifically focused on mental health and addictions for the province. It has some of the brightest minds and pretty much all the organizations, from our psychiatric hospitals to the different agencies that are involved in the delivery of services, Indigenous community services, dealing with first responders. We have the issues in hand, and thankfully the Premier named someone as Minister of Mental Health and Addictions at a very good time, because it's given us the opportunity to prepare a strategy that I believe we're pushing the reset button now as we speak, because of the fact that we weren't really able to roll it out properly when we first announced it. But I believe that the investments are there. We had decided as a campaign promise to invest $3.8 billion in mental health and addictions over 10 years. First investment was made. We're rolling out the second phase of that investment. And again, because of COVID, we weren't able to get into a lot of detail because the budget was pushed back, and it was just an economic statement that came out. But there's a substantial amount of money that we're investing along with the federal government, in addition to the money that's being spent on emergency basis to jumpstart or to help the helplines be able to do more. So I think we have it well in hand. I am concerned about small businesses. I am concerned about medium and large businesses. But one of the things I found, I used to do a lot of insolvency work when I was practicing law. One of the things that I found the most resilient groups within our society are our entrepreneurs. a lot of them have made and lost their fortune at least twice in their life. So they're used to hardship and difficult situations. And I think that, that they're going to call on that strength and that sense within them to be able to jump back and get going. And I think, there's confidence. And one of the things, again, I'm very proud of our government and our premier is the fact that he's instilled a lot of confidence in people. And when he speaks, he speaks with confidence, which means people feel better than they would otherwise. And, he keeps on talking about hope. And hope is the most important thing that we can, as government, give people, is to say we're here to help. And we've done everything in our power, with our finances to the best extent possible to make sure that people had that sense of peace while we're going, this confidence in the leadership that they elected. But even more than that, that we continue to instill hope. And I think, you're going to see a lot more from our government in terms of what we're doing and how we're going to move forward. Mental health and addictions is a huge component, and it's a huge part of what we're doing. And I'm up for the challenge. This is what I came to government to do.
Absolutely. You certainly are. What I want to do with the last 20 minutes or so that we have is really drill down a bit more on, and Mr. Tibollo, you started to address it, on mental health in the workplace specifically, and what it's going to be like when we go back. So my first question is to Minister Tibollo in terms of, are there certain groups of workers who you think have been or will be more impacted by mental health issues now and going into the future?
Yeah, I would say our biggest challenge will be our first responders and frontline workers. They're mostly being fueled by adrenaline right now. I mean, they're putting in insane hours, which has put incredible stress on their families. Is one of the reasons why we came out and said, if you're working, we've got to find a way to get you the childcare supports that you need, because that, we're all parents, so we understand that without our knowing that our kids are safe, it makes us it's difficult to give 100%. So one of the things that we did was we came out with that strategy to support the frontline workers. And, I have a lot of respect for the work that our first responders do as well. This is a difficult time for them. And we're trying to, get them the help that they need, the supports, but they're a unique group. While I may, hesitate to go get help because, I think I can look after it myself, first responders have another layer of concern, and that's that they want their own care. They do not want to be in mixed groups. They want to, so they're even once removed from getting that help. So one of the big focuses that I'll have coming when we start coming out of this will be to be more vocal about making sure that they're healthy, safe, that their families are doing well. And that isn't just our frontline workers include everyone that's been out working, notwithstanding the fact that some of us have had have had to stay at home. So we're going to look at them and make sure that they're, that they're good and that they have the supports that they need.
Well, that's great. I mean, and we've acknowledged, but let's do it again. The frontline workers have been unbelievable, and we do want to especially thank them. I wanted to go to Mary now in terms of what's your advice for employers and managers right now, how they can help address mental health challenges for their employees, and both for right now and shortly when we start getting back to work, whether that's in a month or a little bit later, depending on the sector?
Well, I think that if, depending if people are working from home and they're still connected to their employers, or they're going to be, if they know that they're being hired back to work, employers can actually reach out to their employees. There's nothing more than, having that conversation and touching base and feeling like your employer actually cares about you. I think it's really important. And then once we start to transition back to work, people are going to be going back to work with fear. I know that frontline workers have, you see sort of clips on the news of them crying before they go back into work or that shift because, what does it mean for me? But they're still going going, and they're pushing themselves to do it anyways, which is amazing. I want people to remember that once we transition back to work, to be kind, to be gentle with each other, because people are going to be going back to work with that next level anxiety. Don't make fun of them because they want to wear a mask, or they've got their, workstation set up, or they're, sort of diligently cleaning. Know that everybody's, kind of going through this in a different way. So what you might think, or what you might be more resilient in, someone may not be. So just sort of knowing that, kindness goes a long way.
No, I think that's. I mean, that point is worth repeating. That you're right. If people come back to work, they feel more comfortable wearing a mask. Let them do it. Do you? I want to read you this one, Mary. When an employee is going back to work in their physical office, and they've been away either because of physical distancing or a temporary layoff, so those are very different. They might be feeling that sense of anxiety. And we just talked about, what can the employer specifically do to help ease this process of transition?
I think that what we can start to do to transition, it's almost like when someone goes on a short-term disability or coming back from a long-term disability, if you can sort of think of it that way. A lot of times we have, staggered hours into work. Maybe we're not doing full days in the beginning. Maybe we're only coming in for a couple of hours, and then we sort of extend that work week. So we kind of do, that slow return. And that way it helps people sort of ease in and transition, not only going back into, full-time work, in the way that we may not have been doing it, but also transition our families, because our children are used to having us all at home. We're working from home. We've got this, schedule going on, but now that's going to change. So maybe doing it staggered, and that slow re-entry, can help ease anxiety for not only, the employee, but also the employer, to kind of see how it's all going to roll out.
And Minister Tibollo, how can employees come forward to colleagues and supervisors when dealing with mental health concerns as they start getting back to work?
Yeah, I think there has to be, the employer-employee relationship is a two-way street. The employer wants his or her employees to feel healthy physically and mentally. So I think it's what, we've said in the past from the standpoint of, how do you deal with this issue, whether you're dealing with children, you're dealing with your parents, I think the whole concept is you have to communicate. So if you have issues, the employer, my advice to employers would be, talk to your people, have those conversations, listen to what their concerns are. And, when I say this, I usually say listen 3 times. It's really important to understand what the concerns of the individual are. Mary made a comment that we're not all the same. And you made a comment that one size doesn't fit all. Well, think of your employees that way. Each one of them is coming from a different world. You may or may not know that that person lost someone as a result of COVID, or even just that passed away, because it hasn't been normal, the situation, so the communication may not have been there. You don't know what his or her financial situation was during the period of time that he wasn't at work. You don't know the stresses that he or she's had to deal with the children. You don't know what the relationships were as a result of the tension that was created by the social isolation. So I think the most important thing an employer can do is listen. And I think an employee will be confident enough to say, look, I'm having a difficulty, or I had a difficulty in this situation, and be cognizant of that when it comes to the type of things that you're asking employees to do. And as an employer, I would caution all employers to make sure that if individuals need PPE, there are supplies of PPE now. And if an individual wants to wear a mask, as a matter of fact, I would make it a rule that until the chief medical officer says otherwise, wear a mask at work. Have hand sanitizers, enforce simple rules like wash your hands, every time you leave your work area. Again, subject to practicality, right? Because not everybody is able to do that. But as an employer, put in place a system that's going to build confidence in your employees to say, wow, the employer's, looking after us. Order a deep clean once a week. Handles and door handles and places that, hand railings where there's a lot of contact with those, have them cleaned a little more often, or have wipes that individuals can use once they reach the top of the stairs, or you can use wipes or some kind of a paper napkin or something to open and close doors, or I shouldn't say this because the fire department's going to be upset, but you can also keep a door open so that someone doesn't have to touch the handles to get in and out. Even, I shouldn't say that, but we want to maintain fire safety, and if they're fire doors, they should.
We understand. We understand your mentality. So, Mary, I have one more question. Oh, sorry, Minister.
No, just these are practical things that can give that individual a sense of confidence that the employer cares, and also give him the ability or her the ability to talk to the employer and say, hey, maybe even ask for suggestions. What can we do around the plant or around the office that will make you feel more secure? I saw these shields being manufactured now that if you sit in a workstation, there's a plexiglass shield that unfolds and creates kind of a safe environment. Maybe we've got to move to those, for a short period of time, just to give that individual that extra sense of being secure.
Sure. I mean, to your point, we've seen all the retailers start to do that, so makes some sense. Now, Mary, what I'm going to do is I have one more question for each of you. I'm going to come to you, and then I'll just give you a moment to wrap up afterwards. I was just wondering if I followed up on my last question about what can the employer do when you're going back to work. And I kind of lumped two together, those that were on a temporary layoff and those that have been at home because it's not an essential workplace. From a mental health perspective, does the employer need to treat those two groups differently?
I don't think so necessarily, because I think that, you're sort of looking at how people feel, and when Minister Tibollo was talking about if, that level of confidence, right, or that your employer cares about you, either way. So you're coming off of, sort of those feelings of, whether I've been laid off at work or whether I'm non-essential, it's still coming back in the same capacity. Everybody's going to have a feeling, whether they were laid off or whether they've been non-essential. It's all happening through the same period of time. So I think that transition back to work, whether it's anxiety, whether it's fear, regardless, I think it's almost like the layoff or how it's been done doesn't matter as much as the feeling of transitioning back.
Okay, thank you for that. Minister, we've known each other a long time. You've been a big advocate on mental health files your whole life, really. I just feel it would be remiss if I didn't talk to you about just this overall potential for substance abuse increase right now, and or potentially a rise in domestic violence. So I was wondering, are you concerned about those? And if so, what government supports are available for people dealing with it?
Yeah, and they're both, again, very valid questions. When it comes to domestic violence, we have seen an increase in domestic violence. We've also seen an increase in child abuse. We are actively pursuing putting in place additional space to get individuals out of those situations. There's a lot of work that we're going to need to do in that segment. But, unfortunately, being confined, it's kind of increased the amount of people that are experiencing that domestic violence. So we are looking at that, and we are making investments, and we have done a great deal in that area, and we will continue to do so. We actually at the command table have that group, the interest group associated with the command table as well, to make sure that we don't miss on making sure that we look after them. Addictions is complicated. In normal times, in the best of times, we have access to different types of programs. So we have residential therapeutic communities, we have outpatient treatment. A lot of it has stopped as a result of the social distancing. There is some that's there, there's some supports there, so there's not as much support as there was. Our teams, our mobile intervention crisis units were redeployed so that the nurse practitioners that were previously in police cars have now had to join the hospitals, and we're starting to realign that, so there'll be more support on the street to help people. Homeless populations, transient populations. We've opened up hotel rooms. We've opened up housing for them to be able to help them through this period of time where COVID. Because again, it's a vulnerable population, and we went from the hospitals being concerned to our long-term care facilities. Now the congregate living is the next potential issue, and we're being very careful, having had the experience with long-term care, to make sure that we look after people at that level as well. We are investing in programming, and again, you can't help somebody virtually when it comes to an addiction, especially if they're on some kind of a treatment program like with methadone or Suboxone. Again, we're talking about social distancing, and then at the same time, we want to make sure that if someone is using, that they have someone close by should the need be there to administer naloxone. And it's not, again, people are scared. So we're working through these complicated issues and problems. We've invested and will continue investing in supports. But again, it's a difficult and complicated situation. And right now, we're trying to ensure that the people that are in our care or that we can bring in off the street are put in situations where the congregate living is being managed at a very high level so that we don't have the same kind of community spread that's happened within the long-term care facilities.
All right. Well, a difficult subject. I'm sure we'll be discussing it more, but I appreciate you being an advocate. Mm-hmm. Mary, just for our minute or so left for each of you, just any overall advice you want to leave for people, and how can they get in touch with you if they want to reach out?
So I just wanted to sort of just piggyback a little bit on, just the substance abuse question. Remember, we use, that was a great answer from Minister Tibollo, but, a lot of times we use negative coping strategies, and substance abuse is one of those distress-reducing behaviors for a lot of people. The same way food can be, the same way, rage can show up. They're distress-reducing behaviors. A lot of times when we're practicing, I always make sure that people have a plan. So even during this time, those people, can reach out to someone that they feel comfortable with, that may know about their situation. So if they do need an exit strategy during this time, that, even with social distancing, life comes first, right? So it's, having a plan where someone feels safe enough that they can go for that support if they need to get out of that situation. You can reach me at info@lifeandfamilycounseling.com. You can go to the website, you can look up my name or Life and Family Counseling, and you'll find us there. We are still working through this time, like I said, through video and Skype sessions. So I appreciate, being here today, and hopefully there was some great information. And if people need any, tips or recommendations, they can just email the clinic, and I'd be happy to send some of those out.
Oh, thanks, Mary. That's really great. And this video will continue to be on our archives on YouTube and Facebook. So I'm sure a lot of people will view this. And Minister Tibollo, to you.
Again, I want to start off by thanking the Chamber for the great work that they do, for continuing to put on these Skype meetings to give us an opportunity to speak and to reach out and to let you know the kinds of things that we can do as a government. We're working really hard to make sure that we deal with the COVID-19, that we deal with the economy, and that we help people with their mental health and health needs. We mentioned the different lines that are available, the Connects line, the Kids Helpline, the line with respect to the post-secondary school students, which is the Good to Talk On, and the bounce back lines. Those are great opportunities for individuals to seek help if they don't have a psychologist or a psychiatrist that they're working with. To me, the most important thing to let everyone know is we're all here to help, and we're all in this together. While it's affecting each of us differently, we have to remember our humanity. We have to remember the importance of communicating, and we have to remember that we can beat this because we're seeing it happening with the continued efforts of every person in the province of Ontario. Maintaining that physical distancing is not social distancing. We cannot social distance our emotions and our feelings. So reach out to Mary, reach out to Hospice Vaughan, reach out to the other service providers that are there. And if you're stuck, use one of the helplines. They are amazing. They have access to all the different services across the province of Ontario. And, it's the first step is asking for help. You'll receive it, and believe me, you will feel a lot better. And, Brian, again, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to the community.
It's my pleasure to both of you. We're really pleased to be able to do these segments, and I will say, given the topic, you're both very gracious to be so open with us, and you both have a perfect tone and messaging for what we're really talking about and how delicate it can be. So, Mary Marano, psychotherapist, owner of Life Family Counselling, Minister Michael Tibollo, Associate Minister of Mental Health, and our MPP for Vaughan-Woodbridge. Thank you both again. I'm sure we'll see you both again soon. Stay well and stay healthy. I want to just tell our viewers at home, don't forget that one of the ways we're trying to help you, in addition to these kind of chats and providing real-time information about business supports on our website, we did create a Facebook marketplace to help those who could buy and sell. We've seen very large growth on that. Members can use it for free. So I wanted to make sure you were aware of it. And also, in terms of our business resource series, we're excited that on Monday morning, and I believe that's at 10 a.m., but you can see it on our website, we have Benjamin Tal. It will be our next segment. He's CIBC World Markets Deputy Chief Economist. Anyone who's seen or heard from Benjamin Tal knows what a dynamic speaker he is and what great insights he has on the economy. We're obviously very interested in next steps, what economists are telling us based on how Ontario and Canada are going to be doing in the future. So I look forward to seeing you all then. And again, thank you all for joining us today. I hope you all have a relaxing weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.